Whoa, man. You can't use that.
Why?
That's Metallica, Enter Sandman.
I don't know about that. I don't think it is.
No, you're right, it's not. No. Blood and Black Rum Podcast presents In the Mouth of Madness. Hey guys, welcome back to the Blood and Black Rum Podcast. I'm Ryan from Coldsploitation.com, and I'm joined by my co-host Martin.
How's it going?
I'm doing pretty well on a balmy day today.
As it has been for the past 3 weeks now.
It's funny because, it's such a balmy day, and yet we're watching a film that really leads us into the Halloween season. Directed by John Carpenter.
Woo!
It looks like it's set during a nice autumnal period. And we drank an Oktoberfest while watching. And it's a little bit on the hotter end today. So it's kind of an ironic twist.
It's not even that hot out.
It's not, but it's
like
just
77, but
balmy,
so...
and it's
There's so humid.
There's an ass stench in the room as we record this session. So today we were revisiting. We didn't announce this episode in the last episode when we did Ant-Man and the Wasp because we didn't know what we were doing.
And then you just so happened to see this on your table and like, let's do this.
Yeah, so Scream Factory has really been going back through the unreleased John Carpenter films, the stuff that really hasn't had a Blu-ray release, or at least if it has had a Blu-ray release, it was done in slipshod fashion. It wasn't really like one of those films that was treated with, like a nice scan, more special features. It was one of those, that kind of slipped through. So they were going back through, and they have about, I think they have 3 or 4 film rights to his works that really haven't been released yet. So they've already released Memoirs of an Invisible Man. If you haven't heard of that one, you're not alone. Most people have really not heard of this film or don't know it. It's not very popular in John Carpenter canon, but it stars Chevy Chase as an Invisible Man character. It's sort of a comedy, really. It's more of a comedy than anything else, and especially even from John Carpenter. It's sort of a departure from what he has done in the past. And though he's done comedy aspects to his works, like, some of his films are really based on like comedic antics. Big Trouble in Little China being like the most prominent, I would say, right?
Yeah.
It's probably his most comedic film. So they released that one. They were also releasing what's the other one that they're releasing?
Ghost of Mars.
No, they're not doing that one. That one they're like not touching that one. At least for now, they're not. They haven't.
Well, you
released...
might as well wait. In 3 years, it'll be 20 years. So
yeah.
Get the 20th anniversary. You're like, hey.
Yeah. Oh, you know what it is? It's Someone's Watching Me. Again, and not another well-known John Carpenter film. But the one that they
was a TV movie, wasn't it?
Yes. But the one that they are releasing that people do know pretty well, and it's one of his most respected works, besides, the big ones, and he has a lot of them, but one that's really well respected within the community, especially for a later film in John Carpenter's canon in the 90s, is In the Mouth of Madness. And that's the one that we chose to do for this episode, primarily because it does help lead into our Halloween season a little bit, and also because neither of us have actually seen it prior to this episode, which is kind of surprising. I'm a little bit ashamed to admit that I've never seen it before. So we wanted to check it out and see what it was all about. I know a lot about it. I've seen a lot about it. When I saw John Carpenter in concert, he did play the primary theme from this film, which I thought was a departure from his normal soundtrack, for sure, which we played for you at the beginning of the episode. The Metallica-esque hard rock song, which was very prevalent in the 90s culture anyway. You'd see it quite a bit.
Would have fit with that one like rock song from Leprechaun 2 that we used for the intro for that.
Yep.
You know, the kid's just lying on his bed rocking out. So it kind of reminded me of, except that one's a little bit more grungier. It's like this one's like, let's make it a little metally.
Yep.
Like, you know, I've got to have like, you know.
That one, you got Dario Argento really had a kick towards hard rock features in his soundtracks after, like, it would be more towards the late 80s. He would feature a lot more. How about New Year's Evil that we covered?
Yeah.
Which would have been another 80s cut, but still primarily a punky soundtrack.
New wave.
Yep. So there was definitely, and especially like in some of these early 90s films, and In the Mouth of Madness was released in 1994. And you're talking about things that we've covered on the show before. The Mangler being another one that would have had a very rock-centric soundtrack to it. Just a lot of these, they tended to go more towards that. In some ways because they like to hire out local talent too. So some of these songs that you would hear in a 90s movie were like not even big names. They were more like, since the movie was low budget, they would get just like garage rock bands to come and do a theme for them. And that was the theme. That's not the case with In the Mouth of Madness. John Carpenter actually wrote the theme with Jim Lang, who you said, I didn't know this. The name didn't ring a bell to me at all.
He composed the music for Hey Arnold. That's
a pretty big
departure because that's nice, nice jazzy, mellow.
If you're not a 90s kid like us, you might not know the theme as well as we do.
It's not even just the theme. Like to me, like the theme for Hey Arnold's not really. It's like more the end theme, like the. It's like,
true.
It's that nice like mix of like jazz and big band.
That's interesting too because
you're right. No, it is a really big difference. I remember when I saw like the opening credits, like composed by, score done by John Carpenter and Jim Lang. Like, I know who that is. I had to think about it. And as soon as I looked it up, it was like, I fucking knew it.
And what was the other soundtrack that you said Jim Lang worked on? That was another prominent sort of horror movie or something like that.
No, it wasn't prominent. It was another Carpenter film. It was the film.
Oh, Body Bags. That's right. Body Bags, which was another, which is an anthology film that does have another hard rock score like this. So it's interesting that he did like the hard rock aspects of John Carpenter films, like In the Mouth of Madness and Body Bags, and then he did Hey Arnold, and it wouldn't have been that much longer after
6 years.
Yeah. Really, 6 years? That long?
5, 6 years. Hey, from Body Bags, because it'd be 5 years.
Hey Arnold was what year?
98.
98. So yeah, interesting. For 4 years from 5 years from In the Mouth of Madness, he went on and got rid of all of his Metallica-esque stuff.
Well, I was gonna say, I just find it funny because it's not like he had like that big of like he only had like a couple, like those two, like I think like one other thing before he did Hey Arnold.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering like what made Craig Bartlett be like,
let's get this guy.
Do this.
Yeah, interesting. So he didn't even do any more like Nickelodeon stuff because generally, like if you got a foot in the door at Hey Arnold or at Nickelodeon, or something like that.
Oh, he just did that Hey Arnold.
Very interesting. It's weird the trajectory of certain people in Hollywood and stuff like that. What they did.
Mark Mothersbaugh would be one of them.
Yep.
How from Devo to Rugrats, and then forever on after the Rugrats score, kind of copping that for Wes Anderson films.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So In the Mouth of Madness, though, has kind of become another staple in John Carpenter's genre. Or canon, genre. I wouldn't say that it's probably one of his most popular works. Probably that would be, obviously, Halloween, The Thing. I would say probably next, They Live.
Yeah.
Then Escape from New York, Big Trouble in Little China.
I think it'd be a tie for Escape from New York.
You know what, though? It's hard to say, because I left out The Fog. And The Fog would be up there as well. I really don't know.
I know about just for horror fans or for the layman?
I was just saying for John Carpenter in general, the average films that someone would, of popularity for John Carpenter movies, I guess I would say I'd probably put it as Halloween, The Thing, They Live. Then I think I would go The Fog. Then I would say Escape from New York, Big Trouble in Little China. And then I think it's a toss-up between Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness.
I mean, see, for me, I would say Halloween, obviously, then The Thing, then Escape from New York, because that's got a lot of homage. More so than They Live. It's probably been homaged and, recognized more. Like, more people are going to be apt to recognize Kurt Russell's Snake.
True.
Than, Roddy Piper in They Live.
True.
But then probably They Live, and then Big Trouble in Little China.
Mm-hmm. I don't. It's hard because they all, and in some ways, they all have a different place in people's, interests than others, and it's hard to say. But it just goes to show how many actually huge hits that John Carpenter had.
You know what? I lied. Drop Big Trouble in Little China, Assault on Precinct 13.
That's true as well. We missed that one as well. So it's really hard to say where they would fall. Although I would say that In the Mouth of Madness probably comes in at a later
second
entry.
tier.
Yeah, definitely.
Which for such a great, because we both love John Carpenter.
Yeah,
and for such a great film, film director, second tier for him is not bad.
Exactly.
That'd be like saying, for Stanley Kubrick, maybe Full Metal Jacket's kind of like a second tier film.
Sure.
Okay, still a great film though.
Yep. And I would say, actually, in some ways, I wouldn't agree with, like, the average area of second-tier films, because I would say Prince of Darkness is one of my favorite films from John Carpenter.
Which I have not seen now.
You should really see it. And we'll get into this a little bit more, but Prince of Darkness has a very similar tone and pacing and style to In the Mouth of Madness. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit in terms of, like, how that fits in with his, with his canon. But very interesting to see that how many films John Carpenter really has had that are hits and where he went to in the 90s.
I guess you could say hits after the fact.
Sure.
Outside of Halloween, they were box office,
Yeah, I mean, I would say that most of them.
The Thing wasn't profitable.
Huge hits at the box office, but became cults.
Like I was saying, we even talked about with The Thing. People hated The Thing when it came out.
Yeah.
Which looking back, I mean, it's funny when you look back at like certain, reviews for certain films, like, oh, this film's trash, and then they're like, oh, it's kind of, it's kind of good, because They Live wasn't a big hit. Big Trouble in Little China definitely wasn't a big hit. Well,
it's funny too because they really marketed very specific aspects of culture, and I would think, and I don't know because I didn't look at any of the historical context. But I would think that In the Mouth of Madness would have been a pretty appealing film to people in the 90s because it was very much based on some cultural norms at the time. And we'll take a look at that. But despite the Lovecraftian influence, the more overwhelming Lovecraftian influence that maybe people who weren't really into horror wouldn't get totally, the other aspect of it is that it really riffs on the horror novelists, the gore novelists of the time, like Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Clive Barker, some of the others, who would pump out novels and have a very distinctive cover layout for their novels. It was very much a cultural thing at the time.
Well, not like that, too. You had a Renaissance, if you think about it, with like things during that time period. You also had going on Creepshow.
Mm-hmm.
You had, for kids, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Goosebumps books and that TV show, which is basically this, except
Tales from the Crypt would have been running through that time too.
Yep. So it's much more. A lot of things kind of combined that make it fit definitely within like that early '90s timeline. Because as I told you when we were watching, like this film, say with its premise and what the hell's going on with it, wouldn't even get past. Like you'd like have the outline for it, and some film executive, no, we're not fucking doing this. It's fucking,
Lovecraftian elements aren't really that popular as it is.
I think they've gotten more now.
They have now. Like we had The Void. We had a few others that incorporate Lovecraftian elements, but the whole, the mythos of Cthulhu or something like that has not really been explored that often besides like specific films, Dagon being one of them, which is getting its release by Umbrella Entertainment pretty soon on Blu-ray. But the whole thing, I mean, I would say that probably In the Mouth of Madness is one of the better odes to Lovecraftian horror that we've gotten. That seems to understand the elements behind what Lovecraft was going for when he was writing his deeply racist stories and things like that. But as we'll talk about, we'll get into all that. We'll get into the Stephen King and horror novel influence. We'll get into the Lovecraftian elements. We'll get into the acting in this film.
I'll say, you're well versed in that. I'm not. I don't really know anything about Lovecraft. It's never been something that's ever really appealed to me. I mean, maybe if I went and kind of did,
I think if you started reading some more about it, you would get
maybe find
into it. Yeah.
But I mean, like even the same thing, like Stephen King. I've never read a Stephen King novel. I mean, granted, I don't really care for novels on the whole to begin with. I'm much more a newspaper and historical text type person, but
that's why you should stick to Lovecraft stories, because they tend to be on the shorter end, sometimes novella.
Like maybe I'd find Moby Dick and it's 800 pages interesting, because like 700 of it's not even about like chasing a whale. It's about,
basically
about the history of whaling. Like, ooh, this is interesting to me.
Well, then you should read It by Stephen King, because that's 1,000 pages, and a lot of it takes Derry, the town itself, into account as like sort of giving it its own character passage. So you might like it because it gives the history of Derry.
Well, that's just being bloated at that point. Cut it down.
Yeah,
there wasn't an editor that's like, "Come on, Stephen."
Well, no, he actually, he needed the editor that's in The Mouth of Madness, who seems to be keeping Sutter Kane's novels at a pretty considerable 400-page length. So
I know everyone like
it's basically the same thickness.
There's no Dark Tower. Like, here you go.
Yep.
30-volume book.
Yeah, no, that editor really seemed to keep him concise.
What a name, by the way.
Sutter Kane.
I love that. That's like
yeah, it reminds me of like
part noir, part
Yeah, it reminds me of like noir. It reminds me of the guy from Poltergeist, which I can't even remember his name right now, but it reminds me of that. It's a great name. It's one of those things that really sticks out to you, especially because the name Sutter Kane keeps coming up again. Like the actual announcing of the name is really important for this film. So yeah, it was an interesting choice from Carpenter. All right, let's take a break real quick, because we've already gotten quite a bit into this film, so we got to save some for the rest of the podcast.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's an interesting film.
It is an interesting film.
I think after watching it, I'd say it's probably a good choice.
Yeah. There's stuff to talk about. It's an interesting film with a lot to unpack. So we'll do that in a second. But first, let's take a look at what we're drinking tonight, because I did pick up the Saranac German Roots pack, which they like to say on this pack, it's the German Roots pack, when we all know it's their fall pack. It's what they consider to be the fall release, even though it's out in mid-July. And I think they've begun calling it German Roots because they don't want to stoop to like having to say, oh, it's our fall pack, but we put it out, 2 months early. And then by the time October rolls around, nary an Oktoberfest in sight. So
which we bitch about every year.
I gotta admit though, I am part of the problem, because
you bought it.
Not only did I see that German Roots pack is out for like one day and I pick it up.
Ed, you sent me a text knowing I'd get angry. Like, yep. I couldn't help myself.
It's absolutely partly my fault.
Well, yeah.
I am the consumer that sees the pack and is like, I have conflicting feelings about it, but I love Oktoberfest, so I'm going to pick it up.
See, that's the thing, too, because as we talk about 1,000 times, every time the season rolls around, we're both our favorite style beer is a nice Marzen beer. Nice Oktoberfest. The beer love of my life right now has been Genesee's Ruby Red Kolsch. I can't expound upon enough how much I love that beer and what a game changer it has been for me in the summertime.
And we did do it. We did,
And that's literally all I've been drinking. The cream ale variety pack from them.
Siri's really picking that up. She was really talking about German. She was trying to read the entire conversation we just had in German. So,
but anywho, I've fallen so much in love with that pack. I haven't really drank anything, even the cream ale variety pack from Jenny that I was really looking forward to. I've only bought it once, because that Ruby Red is just so good. And they don't fucking have it out. It's gone. They're already prepped
They're
and
getting their Oktoberfest ready.
And that makes me angry because it's been 100+ degrees and humid every day for the past 3 weeks. And as much as I love Oktoberfest, I do not want a malty, heavy, taxing, sweaty beer to drink on these hot, humid days. It just it makes me so mad. Well, I just can't.
But we did it. We did drink it today. And I mean, so here's the thing. I think that Marzen style beers have become sort of popular, even though they're, technically a lot of them are considered an Oktoberfest. Marzen style seems to be popping up even though it's not fall. Like I had at Brown's, they were already making their Marzen style, and that was in like June. They already had their Marzen style out. I guess maybe they're making it even though, technically it's an Oktoberfest, but they think people still want to drink it even if it's warm out. And I won't say that I don't not enjoy an Oktoberfest on a really hot day, but it's the malty heaviness of it that really makes it a beer that you don't want to like drink on a really hot day.
It's great on a crisp, cool night.
But
not just the fall, but in the winter too. I would love like to stick imagine like a nice Marzen style, but they add like maybe like some nutmeg and coriander.
Sure.
To make it like a Christmas version. Wouldn't that be delightful?
It would be nice. I think I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, Marzens, they just do tend to be heavier. They tend to be, what especially, I would consider thicker.
I was say, especially American style.
Yep. Because German style Marzens, they really tend to be on the lighter side.
They're still malty, but like compared to like kind of like how, we're laymen's when it comes to beer knowledge. We know like styles and all that, but I guess
to be honest with you, I haven't traveled to Germany, so I don't know the.
We've only tried like a couple of like actual like Spot and then Hoffenbrau.
Yep.
But those ones were like lighter compared. It's kind of like the American IPA with how in a West Coast style how they hop the shit out of it compared to say if you were to have a English style IPA, which is much
different,
much drier, much more balanced. Same thing with like our style like pale ale versus like a British or a Belgian pale ale for that matter too. So it's kind of
it's interesting how they do it and how what we call the German Marzen style has been really malted down quite a bit more than what you get from a German style. I will admit I prefer the American style. I think it makes sense for us that it's just in the fall. That's what I want is a much more malty beer, heavier, nice for a crisp, because I love the crispness. That's a big thing for me about fall. I don't like it being really hot. I would really prefer it to be like 50 degrees, kind of chilly. You gotta wear flannel. You're outside. You're drinking a Marzen.
Even at that,
feel great.
Even at that temperature, you could, if you didn't want to wear a sweater, you could just wear your t-shirt.
Not too hot, not too cold. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And so that's what that Marzen's supposed to do. It's supposed to, you don't want a winter warmer because then you're going to be
toasty.
Yeah, really, really toasty inside and pretty bogged down with all that nutmeggy flavor. But at the same time, that's what I get from a Marzen. That's what I love. So yeah, it's not great for the hot weather, but we did have one tonight. I do love the Saranac Oktoberfest. Getting to our point, though, of the one that we actually wanted to bring up that we've never had on the show, because I believe we've done Saranac Oktoberfest before.
Yes,
we've definitely done it before. The one that we have on the show today is the 1888 Pils, which is a new beer in this Saranac pack for the German roots. Now, they do German roots all the time, but they kind of do a change out.
Third year now?
Yeah.
It's the third year. I think they started when we first started doing the podcast, because the first year is when they had the Darktoberfest.
Yeah, probably my favorite beer that they've ever made is the Darktoberfest.
That we constantly, just opine about.
I wish Saranac would just send me a batch of the Darktoberfest.
Me too.
Great.
Yeah, I would love it too.
For the show. We'll talk about it every week if you want us to.
Give us an FX Matt brewing sign. We'll be like, hey,
Darktober, yeah, I know. Yeah, so they do it every year now for the past 3 years. They change out a couple of the beers in there. You said, Darktoberfest was one. Last time they had a different style Marzen beer. It was a fest beer, I think they called it.
I would say there's two. Usually it's a 4-pack.
Yep.
Of 4 different styles. The Black Forest is always in there, which we've reviewed before, and that's their Schwartz beer, and it's probably the greatest black lager you'll ever have. It's so good, even the toffee-nosed snobs at Beer Advocate, the Bros gave it a 95.
Yeah.
So, and their Oktoberfest. Those are the two.
Those are the mainstays.
And then this year they mixed it up and they put in one that we haven't had, which is Das Boot.
Yep.
Which from the looks I don't know, but from the looks of it, kind of look like it might be like a Vienna lager.
It's Vienna lager.
Yeah.
I have had it. I had one before. It's good. Vienna lager style, hard to mess up. I wouldn't say that it's anything like super go out of your way to try, but it's a good beer. I like it. I would still replace the Darktoberfest with it immediately. But so that was the one. We haven't had that one on the show before. And then the other one is the 1888 Pils. And the 1888 Pils, I would say, is very reminiscent, although not the same, but similar to Sam Adams' Noble Pils that they put out in the spring. You think about spring and fall, not so different in the style of, it's in the spring it's going from colder to warmer. In the fall it's going from warmer to colder. So
I would say
it makes sense.
For the 1888 Pils, it's more of like kind of like a beginning fall beer. Mm-hmm. Like right when it's starting to get a little bit cooler, but it's still kind of warm.
You're still getting a hoppy flavor to it.
Not very malty at all. It is.
No, I wouldn't say so.
And I would say compared to Sam Adams' Noble Pils, it's not nearly as hoppy.
Because the Noble Pils has 4 different hops.
5
different hops. Whereas this 1888 Pils, I believe, only really has like 1 or 2. I would say it has a Citra.
And probably a Noble. And that's it.
And I would say, that's probably about it. So I think it's good. Again, I don't think it's something that you would really go out of your way to pick up. But I think for the most part, the German Roots Pack, if people are getting it, they're really getting it for the Oktoberfest and maybe just to try the new stuff that's in there. And I would say, again, this works out fine.
I'm saying, if you don't like it, you can just get yourself a 12-pack at Oktoberfest.
Yep. I think this works out fine. It's good. I wouldn't ever go out of my way to get like a 6-pack of 1888 Pils, but I think it does its job. And with that said, too, I'm not a huge fan of the Noble Pils either. Like, I'll have it, but it's not something that I really go out of my way to get. Yep. I feel like if you're going to do it, you might as well either just go for the Pale Ale or IPA choice or go for a Pilsner. And really, in between, there's not a whole lot of variation between them. Like, it's one or the other. It's trying to build up sort of like a middle ground, but I don't think there's that much deviation between the two where you would,
Kind of like how they have the India Pale Lager, the IPL.
Exactly. The IPL doesn't really do that much for me either because what really is...
the crispness of a lager compared to like a pale ale gets lost when you put that many hops in it.
I just don't really see with those IPLs, I just don't see the difference between them enough where I would be like, oh yes, I love the IPLs. I'd rather have an IPL than an IPA. It just doesn't... Maybe it's me. Maybe it's my undiscerning taste buds.
Because I agree too. I agree. Like, if you didn't tell me that 1888 was a Pilsner, technically, a hoppy Pilsner, I'd be like...
You might think it's a pale ale.
Yeah. It's like kind of like a slightly hoppier than their regular pale ale.
Yep.
Less, because their pale ale is also pretty malty too, because it's more of a kind of closer to an English style than it is like an American pale ale. I'm like, it's kind of like, kind of like an American pale ale. But
yeah,
no, I agree.
I think it's good though. I mean, it's definitely a solid choice if that's what you got. So check it out. That's in the Saranac German Roots Pack, and you won't be disappointed because it's got the Oktoberfest in there.
Rarely is one disappointed with Saranac's.
It's true. Very true.
At least on this podcast. Yeah. Wink, wink.
Exactly. Send us that Darktoberfest. All right, guys. So we're gonna talk about In the Mouth of Madness. And get right into it.
What a great title, by the way.
Yeah, so the title is derived from the Lovecraft story At the Mountains of Madness, which is sort of your first lead-in, I guess, to what this film is going to be about. And a lot of the Sutter Kane stories that we hear about throughout the film are based on Lovecraftian tales. And a lot of times Carpenter takes the stories and he really manipulates the titles, but they're very, very similar to the original Lovecraft titles. So you were saying before that you really haven't followed Lovecraft, but for those
I just know Cthulhu's a thing.
Right, and we do see that a little bit. Like you see that on some of the book covers and stuff, that there's like this tentacle-like creature, which would be considered the elder gods, and they call them the old ones in this film. And that's like his main mythos. But
that made me think of DC. First, there were the old gods.
True. I mean, most of that does come in some way from Lovecraft. But Lovecraft, he really had this mythos of the Cthulhu mythos, the cycle of the elder gods. But then he also did other stories that really weren't related in many ways to the elder gods. But what they did talk about was that idea of like arcane knowledge that you really shouldn't have, or the search for knowledge that when you get right down to it, you at the end you wish you didn't actually know that stuff. So it's really about like us as scientists trying to figure out like the purposes of the world, what our lives should be, why we're alive. And at the end of the day,
I was gonna say, if you're thinking of it in biblical terms, God telling Adam, like, stay away from that goddamn apple.
Exactly.
You don't, you know.
Yeah, it's that search for hidden knowledge, and once you find it, you figure out that human minds weren't supposed to know it. There's a reason why we don't know that information, because we can't handle it. What do you do with it at that point? Now you're irrevocably changed, and you are sort of like this alternate human being from everybody else. And so in a lot of ways, I think that's what John Carpenter really set out to do within the mountains in the Mouth of Madness, because the whole story really does revolve around the idea that reality is what we make it. And at a certain point, the main character, John Trent, really doesn't know what reality is anymore.
Played by Sam Neill.
Yeah.
The incomparable Sam Neill. Hot off of Jurassic Park, Sam Neill.
Who is probably not at the top of his game in the Mouth of Madness, Sam Neill.
To be fair, I've never been one to think that Sam Neill is
a great actor. I will agree with you in that I think that he doesn't have much range in the things that I've seen him in.
He's pretty a wooden... I'm trying to think, what the hell's the follow-up to... 70s horror film starring Gregory Peck.
The Omen?
Yes.
Okay.
He stars in that as Damien. The sequel to that, I think,
right.
From the mid-'80s is Damien.
Yeah. I just think that he doesn't have a whole lot of range, and that kind of shows in the Mouth of Madness. Like, he does, in some ways, need to be sort of a
layman?
He's a layman, but he also needs to be emotional, because he has to show a lot of different emotions. He has to show, like, sarcasm. He has to show disbelief. And then towards the end, insanity. And he's really not good. A lot of those things tend to boil down into like a cheesy sort of acting from him, where he's really hamming it up instead of actually portraying those emotions.
I think that's part of the direction, though.
It's possible.
Because, I mean, if we know anything from a film that's came out around the same time, too, The Mangler... or any New Line film of, the early 90s and mid-90s.
Yeah.
The acting's always kind of...
suspect.
And I think that's kind of, like I said, it's kind of like more of a thing of the period, kind of like what they're going for the time. Sort of like
an exaggerated element to it, rather than actual realism to it.
Because, as we said with The Mangler, like, Tobe Hooper is not a bad director.
He had some great films. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Ted Levine is not a bad actor for all intents and purposes, but in that film, he's batshit crazy. So it's kind of... And the same thing with John Carpenter. Like, he, through his films, you got, like, 8 different versions of Kurt Russell. You got to see Kurt Russell, Kurt Russell's range. So I think it... though I don't think Sam Neill's particularly that great of an actor, I think what he does here is fine. I think, because like I said, it kind of fits the time period of, like, kind of how, especially in horror films, how kind of people acted before, the renaissance of slasher films.
Yeah. I mean, Sam Neill here, he has to portray this layman character, John Trent, who is for all intents and purposes, should be a very boring guy. He's an insurance fraud investigator. In my opinion, and in my experience, that must be, for most people, a really dull job.
Top 5.
Yeah. Of just going around, like, can I see your books? And just looking through the books.
And they're trying to make it, they're trying to make him interesting, because the one time when he's, like, breaking down that one guy, and, like, how he's saying, like, his case is bullshit. It's like, oh, I thought this is supposed to be a horror film. Hold on, now when we stepped into a 1940s noir now.
Yeah, this film in particular does derive a lot of its noir-like aspects, the detective work, from a Clive Barker film previously, Nightbreed, which has Harry D'Amour in it, and that's Clive Barker's character of like a private eye detective, like a private dick. And this film, in some ways, with Sam Neill's character, really resembles that in terms of like the noirish characteristics, the guy who's like interviewing people. But this guy is an insurance fraud investigator. He's like, there's no reason why he's interviewing this guy like a cop who's trying to get down to the bottom of like some heinous murder.
He's freelance. That's
exactly. Like I guess he can do whatever he wants, but at the same time, you know, he's not that intimidating. But at the beginning of the film, we see this guy sweating bullets because he's like, this guy's on to me. He knows I set this arson. You know, it's like, this guy's an insurance fraud investigator. He's not super intimidating.
It really did make me think of like the last chapter in L.A. Noir when you have to play as that...
The dickbag
insurance
fraud guy.
Yeah, which... off topic, but that part of the game pissed me off because I never thought he was like a likable. He's a piece of shit. Like though Cole had his faults, you know.
Yeah.
He wasn't a bad person. This guy's just like a pissy, like, oh, you know, like, I want to be. You did bad things. I can't remember his name because he's such a whiny piece of shit. But
I do think it's interesting though with like the insurance fraud thing. That
by the way, what a just like wow.
It's a weird element to this film because if you think about it, this is like great lengths for an insurance fraud investigator to like travel to this place, investigate Sutter Kane's novels, read like all of them, literally all of them in one sitting, and do some detective work. I don't understand why John Carpenter just didn't make him a detective.
See, that's why Sutter Kane's better than Stephen King. They're light reads compared, you know.
That's true.
You know,
true. It is a light read.
You're not mapping out an entire, you know, fortnight to like, all right, so I'm gonna hit it, you know.
Yeah. But I don't understand why he didn't just make him a detective because, for all intents and purposes, that's what he is. Because he's detecting where Sutter Kane is.
I think it's because it'd be too stereotypical.
I guess, yeah, maybe.
And I mean, it's an interesting way to get to the whole point of like kind of how Sam Neill's character, John Trent's, very much like what he can see and experience as reality. And, you know, and how by being an insurance fraud agent and seeing all these different cons and whatnot, he knows how to cut through the bullshit. You know, when he's telling that one guy that he was like kind of had as like an apprentice when he was interviewing that first guy about the fraud. You know, and the guy was like, "Man, you're that's so awesome how you handled that, and you know, that's great." And he's like, "No. You want to deal with the pros. That's when it gets interesting. These like small time guys, they don't know what they're doing, so you can cut through the bullshit right away and figure out what's rational. What's the pros you want to watch." And so when this whole world, his whole reality gets turned upside down, that's
I mean I think thematically it makes sense. I think it could have just as easily worked with the detective, but it's just funny how they went with the insurance fraud investigator approach to it.
Well, if you made him a detective, then you're just ripping off the Wicker Man.
It's true. I mean, there is a lot of other detective sort of noirish elements to other films, so maybe he wanted to avoid that sort of.
But it's only there for the first 15 minutes, and then once they're kind of off and running, that whole like noir aspect's dropped. That's why it's kind of like it's kind of weird.
Well, it is funny too because at the beginning. Once Trent meets up with Linda Stiles, who is supposed to be the PR editor for this publishing company, who's attending wherever Trent is going because she's supposed to be like following him, and we find out that really this whole Sutter Kane thing is supposed to be a PR stunt that's really truly gone wrong. He leans up to Linda Stiles by an elevator, like very like intimidatingly, almost like trying to woo her in some way.
Like if you don't, and like hey, like if you say it's very Dennis Reynoldsy like you can't say no to dinner with me and looking over these files because of the implications.
That's right. Yeah, because like that's a very noirish thing to do, like especially a 40s noir of like a man who's imposing himself, thinking like a woman should be attracted to him.
Like why aren't like if she said no, just slap her. Like come on, you want to go to dinner with me? Okay, fine. See, she likes me.
Yep.
No, I'm afraid you might beat me. No, she she.
And I think the other thing too is the consistent use of Sam Neill smoking cigarettes in like a very sultry manner of him like taking the cigarette box, flipping it up a little bit, putting it to his mouth,
doesn't
like
it
in the
make
corner.
Doesn't it make you want to smoke?
It does, yeah, because that was like a big thing that, you know, some of those groups that are trying to get smoking out of movies.
I know,
because it is very
alluring,
attractive and alluring. It's like, wow, look at that cool guy.
Yeah,
who,
when
like,
you
flips
see,
the cigarette up
we talked about it before on the podcast when it comes to like when you see Sean Connery getting introduced in Dr. No for the first time, when he says James Bond for the first time, he's pulling out a beautiful like porcelain like cigarette case and like, you know, putting it in his mouth. It's great.
I gotta admit, it's alluring, especially like Sam Neill. He looks good smoking a cigarette. I gotta say. However,
he does look like a guy that wouldn't smoke, though.
He does, yeah.
Because the way he kind of holds it too, and kind of like the way they always cut away. So I don't think he was actually smoking. I think
he didn't really smoke at all. Actually, like every time they showed him, he had to put it out.
Yeah.
So, but one thing that I do think too is that like probably smoking companies are sitting there like taking notes of like people who are smoking and be like, what's the best way they look when they're smoking? Because if you think about some other people, like regular people who smoke, it doesn't actually look that attractive.
Well, see, that's what I know. Well, most people I see at work,
they're just like puffing.
Yeah, in 2 minutes, it's like, wow, you spent $10 on that pack.
Yep.
You get 20 of them. You burn through that one cigarette in 2 minutes.
In the movies,
nice long
damn
drag.
cool.
Yeah.
You look damn cool. Cruising around in a car with it.
Well, that's why you got to watch Thank You for Smoking.
Exactly.
Have you seen that movie?
I have not.
Oh my god.
I think that a lot of the smoking companies were like taking notes and then putting it in and like they probably were standing there while seeing
they weren't taking notes. No. See, that's the thing. They weren't taking notes. They were telling them this is how you film it to make it look.
Yeah.
Get the people. Have Fred Flintstone be like, hey, you know what I like to do after a long day at the rock quarry? Have a nice Winston.
Yep. But those noir qualities really do come out here. I think, yeah, you're right. More so in the beginning of the film than towards as we get further into it. But interesting element to it that I liked, actually. It really sucks you in at the beginning of the film.
It'd be interesting to see John Carpenter do a noir.
More of a noir film. I think this is probably like as close as we're going to get.
Well, obviously. Yeah. It's a dead genre. Kind of like how Westerns are basically been dead.
I think, like I said, if you want to see something close to that it's not John Carpenter, it would be Nightbreed, because that really does have the noir qualities from Clive Barker of kind of like what this does, and even goes a little bit further to it, because he's really about a detective discovering this cabal of monsters.
You were just using
I'm using that word because that's the original name of the story. So cabal is the name.
No, but no, I know what the word. I know what the word means, but you've been on a torrent of just sprinkling in like all these words, like just.
I guess so. Yeah,
it's great.
This is a collegiate level podcast. I'm sorry. No.
Your SAT vocab must be.
That's right. Yeah.
But no, it's. I love it. Every time you beat me about a word like that, it's
yeah. Well, so the other thing that I think is really interesting about In the Mouth of Madness, besides the whole noirish aspect, is that it really does get right a lot of the Lovecraftian elements, and I think where it really hits its stride after the whole beginning part and really setting up like the whole Sutter Kane aspect is when it gets to Hobbs' End, which is part of the story where Sam Neill's character really figures out that it's an actual location in New Hampshire by cutting apart all of Sutter Kane's book covers randomly, pretty much.
No. Each book cover has like a red outline.
Oh, does it really?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
I noticed the one on the Hobbs End cover, but I didn't really notice the other ones.
Yeah, no, all of them had like some kind of outline, and he cut them out, and,
gotcha.
and you piece them together.
I was thinking he was just like in a fit of madness, just like cutting, and he comes up with the New Hampshire outline. And as somebody else, I'd be like, what the fuck?
Well, that would kill me.
Yeah,
I can't do that. Like when I see people who like would buy like textbooks for college and like highlight shit and write notes in the book, it's like
can't cut them apart.
It's like no,
it actually did hurt me a little bit to see him cutting off all the covers because they're so
beautiful. And
you know what? Some of those old books, like Stephen King books like that, I do have those books that are missing covers, and it hurts. It hurts me physically that they are missing the covers. So seeing him cut them off intentionally, yeah.
And I will say too that the agent that was coming to kill Sam Neill when he was talking to his friend, partner, accomplice
with the axe. As you see it.
That I was thinking, like, are we going like a Dawn of the Dead route? Like the way he kind of looked and was like moving,
sort of like a zombie.
Yes, very zombie.
Yeah, the film does have a lot of zombie-like elements to it, especially like with the kids and stuff with the makeup. Well,
like I was saying like a lot. It does borrow kind of a lot from a different. That's why it's kind of like this for I would say for compared to most John Carpenter films. There's a lot of much more borrowing from like other like kind of films and genres that like you wouldn't see kind of, compared to like his other films. Like obviously with The Thing, he's borrowing from The Thing from Another World because it's a remake, but he's doing his own thing. Same thing with Halloween. Like there's some like Black Christmas elements in there and whatnot, but it becomes its own thing. This one has a lot of, and as I described to you, like just from like the way it's directed, it feels like a very Italian giallo film. Like in how everything's like how it's paced, the editing that they use, how they cut the things, the elaborate colors and kind of like setup. It's like an Italian film.
Yeah, I would say that the pacing is one of those big things that's like Italian. Because it is on a slower end of pacing.
And it's only 95 minutes.
A lot of dialogue.
Exposition for, like, things that are going on.
And the other, like, you mentioned the color. And one of the other things, too, is just the whole creature-ness to it. Like, all of those crazy, like, flashes and creatures and stuff is very reminiscent of some of, like, the 80s Italian films that would have, creatures in the background that... where like special effects work. It reminds me somewhat of like Shocking Dark and things that Italian films would do.
I was thinking too with like the whole, not even like, because like I would say this is like a pretty good mashup of American style horror with like the Lovecraftian like creature style like horror, but then also like I said, the way it's directed and the tone of it makes it feel like an Italian film. Because like when you have him like having those flashbacks, like the axe and the blood splattering and all that. To me, it's like that's like very much like an Argento film.
Yeah,
the way like like it made me think of like Tenebrae. The way like how that like kind of.
It's also very symmetrical too. A lot of times it's pretty symmetrical.
The whole asylum and how that kind of looked in the beginning is that like to me made me think of kind of like not just Italian like an Argento film, but also at the same time kind of like The Shining because Kubrick is always big on symmetry. And kind of, I don't know why, but Manhunter too.
Well, Manhunter for sure. Yeah. One of the interesting things in this film too is that we talked about a little bit Sam Neill looking like this was off the podcast, but Sam Neill looking a little bit like Bruce Campbell in this film, but he also looks like Jack Nicholson a little bit in this film too. And I don't know if that was intentional, but it certainly has a lot of the elements of The Shining, and I'm glad that you brought it up. Because you have the whole axe element, Sam Neill basically as a main character going crazy, and I think that it has a lot of that element of The Shining too. And I did notice a little bit of a Jack Nicholson comparison there, especially when Sam Neill's kind of going in his theatrics.
Yeah, like when there's a good shot of him that reminds me of like The Shining, kind of like when he's in the asylum. He kind of the way he's like kind of looking down, and he like kind of coyly like lifts his head up, and the way he smiles, kind of like very like the way you would say like, that's how Jack Nicholson would like do that, kind of like
yeah. What do you? So I think that one of the interesting elements here is the aspect of reality, and that a lot of times our reality as a viewer, and we're supposed to be really seeing this through Sam Neill as a character. Our reality is kind of predicated on whether we actually believe that all of these things that are happening to Sam Neill are really actually happening, or if he is in some way just experiencing a mass madness that has occurred because of reading Sutter Kane. What do you think about the whole aspect of this reality that we're presented with in the film? Is everything really happening as we see it, or is there some sort of attempt to make it so that Trent as a character is what we're supposed to be experiencing as a form of madness that's not really happening?
So I think you put it well right there. I think if you're looking at it on the basic level, you can take it for what it's worth. That he's going mad, but it's because of the Sutter Kane novel that's actually connected to the old gods, and that's what is driving everybody mad, and that's what's happening. You can take it basically at the basic level, but I think the film does become more interesting when you look at it like maybe everything that's going on that's been happening and how the film ends at this apocalyptic level. Like, is it all just in his head? Is he just experiencing his own hallucinations and delusions?
Right.
That's what makes that it makes it interesting is how it handles that. So like in the film is vague, into which obviously it's leaning more towards the whole very basic, like it's Sutter Kane like joins with the old gods and he becomes a type of god and deity, and he's controlling and manipulating things, and it's all real. But like I said, it's vague enough to where like if you're sitting there, you could think and come away with, oh, maybe this is all in his head.
And I think part of it too is the other aspect of it that we see is that a lot of what we see is from Trent's perspective, and even if we're not seeing it from Trent's perspective, like half of the movie or a good portion of the movie does take place with just Linda Stiles as she's driving the car. We could also presume that that's just part of Trent's dreaming or his lucid state. But one of the things that really stands out is towards the end of the film when Trent is in this cell and he's telling his story to a guy who's come to investigate because he's realized that there's a lot of mass madness in the world at this time, and he's trying to link these things together. He never really tells Trent like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. It's left up to like,
well, because you could formulate that he's kind of playing along because he's trying to get him to tell like what's going on. So he's trying to delve deeper into Trent's mind. Because if he goes out there's like, no, there's no mass madness going on out there, then it's going to shut Trent down. So he's not going to get to hear what he's got to say, what he wants to learn from.
It's almost like a Loomis style, like working with the patient, rather than just saying like, no, that's not happening. You're crazy. He lets him go along with his delusion.
Well, that's how psychotherapy, like like whether the psychiatrist believes what you're telling or not, it's more a ploy to get you to open up and like oh, you saw that, go on, you saw that unicorn tape, what did it look, go on, tell me about it.
One thing that I also found really interesting, and you brought up this point, is that Sam Neill never really gets to smoke, and part of that does stem from Sam Neill never really having agency. So he always tries to smoke and people tell him not to. And the whole film really is about having agency. Do you have agency over what you do? Or does something else have agency over what you do? As in a all-knowing God, as in Sutter Kane, who basically becomes a god, as in an illness, a mental illness that causes you to lose your own agency in the act of performing whatever it is that your mind tells you to do. I think that's really interesting and telling as well. I don't think that In the Mouth of Madness really gives us a definitive answer. I think you can see it both ways and really not have a wrong opinion on it. I think John Carpenter left it fairly simplistic at the end in that it's the apocalypse is actually happening just so that it had some sort of resolution to it. But I think you can see it both ways equally without really needing to change your mind on certain things that happen in the film that much, because whatever we see, you can always just chalk up to part of that is just our POV from Trent, who's having this delusion, because we do see multiple times that he has a delusion inside of a delusion inside of a delusion. So, it all could be happening, or it could all just be in multiple delusions within Trent's mind. And
that's what, again, makes it interesting. As we've said 1,000 times in the podcast, less is always going to be better than more. This film, I'm sure, was it rated R?
Yeah.
There's no gore. This,
not really, no.
For the body count that's in this film, they always cut away. So, did that person die?
Right.
Is that so? And that's an interesting thing. Like, was that intentional? Did they cut away from it because it's supposed to be like it's in his mind, so he's like thinking it, or is it because like budgetary constraints or something, or is it a mixture of both? That's what that's what makes it interesting. And I think this film does have a lot of interesting points. I think some of them though are kind of flawed in how they handle it. One of them being the whole idea of like Sutter Kane's books. They're just some people just latch onto them and lose their sense of perception. As I said before on the podcast, you're the reader. You're the one that reads Stephen King novels and stuff. Have you ever walked away from reading a novel and be like, I'm terrified or I'm chilled to the bone like that?
I haven't, no. I mean, I guess maybe the only thing that you could really say is that you could have a bad dream every now and then. Like,
I know, but even still, especially now, like maybe more so before the invention of film, where it's like, okay, that could easily seep in, because that's all you know, like kind of have a story told to you is through either the written or spoken word.
Mm-hmm.
But once like you've seen like a film and it's literally visual, where you can manipulate and make things look as real as possible. Don't books kind of...
I agree. I think that books are tough. The only thing that you can really... I think more so than just literally having a monster in a book, the scarier thing about when you read a novel or a book is thinking that this can actually happen, or some version of it. So thinking about, I think, what is scarier than having, like in this film, elder gods or something like that, is that you have a knowledge of something that you can't get over. And that doesn't necessarily mean like literally like knowledge about how the world was made that you can't get over. But let's say you have knowledge about your wife that you just literally cannot get over. That ruins your relationship with your wife.
Like so for instance, that'd be like she cheated on you, but you can't like. Yeah, you can't come to her and like and talk about. So it's like something that's like just like about it, and like it's just eating you up a lot. And
mentally, you're constantly lingering on it. That's scary.
That'd be like
how about like you find out something horrifying about your parents, that your parents have been great people. You always known them to be super nice, super happy, and then all of a sudden one day you find out something horrifying that changes your perception of your parents forever. That's a very different style of terror that works well within books, because it does eat at your sense of reality.
Because you have to think about it.
Exactly.
But again, like something like the old gods, like they're written in like...
Right.
I like
that stuff doesn't really scare in the way that like when you're reading it, you're not terrified.
Or like Pennywise.
Right.
Like that's like a much more interesting and horrifying concept in the visual medium than the written one. There's not enough verbose words that you could use that'd be like, oh, yeah. that's ooh.
And even then, we've actually really gotten to the point where movies don't even really do it justice to scare you.
I was gonna say that too. Like something like, again, Night of the Living Dead, when that came out, it's terrifying. These people just lingering about eating. People who watch that now who've seen other horror films, like, what's the fuck's scary about this film?
Right. And that continually occurs to the point where you become like me and you become pretty much desensitized to most scares in movies. That's not something that can really get you anymore. You have to be more immersed. So what I would say that is more immersive now is probably video games. Video games scares are a little bit more immersive because sometimes you tend to transport yourself as a POV into that game, and you're a bit more immersed in that.
And because it relies on user input, you have to be more focused.
Exactly, You're focused on it, so it's scarier. And I do get nervous within video games. And I think even going past that is going to be VR. VR is probably going to be the closest that you can get to being legitimately terrified, even though you know that it's fake. When you're in VR, it really feels real. And so there is still that sense that you're terrified.
Well, I think for film, a lot of filmmakers realize it's not gore that's the terrifying thing. It's more the situation scenario. So like today... What's been like kind of like the scarier films that like people have been like walking away from, like that's good.
The
like,
situational ones,
like Quiet Place.
Sure,
they're like, or that's what it's called, right?
Yeah, a Quiet Place.
Yeah, with that one, or It Follows. Like
it would be probably the one that I would say would the most effective would be Hereditary, one that lies itself in real world concepts of, again, like I said, experiencing something that you can't move past. You legitimately, like, it was something so horrific that you cannot move past it. And you're stuck just constantly thinking about it. I would say that's probably the one that comes closest to being actually terrifying. And it's not terrifying in the sense that like you're scared of it. It's more like you dread it. It's a dread that you like hope that never happens to you. And so I think it's a little bit different. And so in some ways, In the Mouth of Madness really brings that up, because it is about the dread of not being able to have your own agency, of at some point in your life experiencing this moment where you're like, I'm not really sure what is real anymore. I don't, am I actually experiencing something, or is it something in my head that I'm experiencing? And I would say that the closest that you can come to this is like, and I'm not an expert in this obviously, but having like a bad trip when you're high. Because when you're high and you get that like that, in some ways you know that you're high and you can tell yourself, hey, I'm high. But in the other sense, there's some ways where you cannot limit where you're going in your head. And so I've had a bad trip like that where you get paranoid, you get delusional, and you are in this state where you're like, I don't like where this is going, but you're helpless to stop it. And I think that's where In the Mouth of Madness goes, is that it's like you're questioning what reality is and you have no control over what it is.
It's not totally explicit in the film, but it is a point that's brought up because, as we said, being the insurance fraud guy, Sam Neill's very focused on, again, what's real, what's not real.
Concrete facts.
Yeah, rational, being rational. He's, very much kind of like a Spock character. He only, believes what he can see and rationalize. And when, like, all these crazy things are happening around him, the first thing he's trying to do is rationalize, like, this isn't real, and why is this happening?
Yeah.
This is just an elaborate scheme. He's trying to, think about it. I think the only flaw with it is, like, the film's not long enough to kind of expound upon it. It's very much go, go, go.
Yeah, once it reaches Hobbs End, and once he experiences Linda really becoming this weird tentacle creature that's really an elder god, at that point it really rushes forward. It just keeps going and it really doesn't settle down. At that point you're like in an alternate reality where it constantly is morphing. And I can see where some people wouldn't like that, because some people don't like to not be grounded in a reality where you can actually tell what's going on. And in some ways I understand that, because
but again, it makes sense for this film.
It makes sense for this film, but sometimes when in those films, it feels like a cop-out, in that, like, you just feel like they didn't have an ending, so they came up with something that just was bending reality and bending the audience's mind. But I don't think that's the case.
Well, it's not the case here, because that's all halfway through the film when you find out that Sutter Kane's been
manipulating the whole thing by writing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting element, and it comes
very
out,
meta too.
Yeah, it's very meta. Especially towards the end of the film when you see the film itself replaying for Sam Neill's character. Definitely a meta thing. I want to talk about this a little bit before we go into like some of the other elements that I just want to bring up, is that In the Mouth of Madness really occurs in between two important elements of John Carpenter's filmmaking. So in 1988, John Carpenter did Prince of Darkness. Not long after that, he did They Live. And then after that, he did In the Mouth of Madness. So, actually, Prince of Darkness was 87. So, when in that time frame, we definitely see a shift in John Carpenter's output. In the Mouth of Madness is very similar to Prince of Darkness in a lot of ways. Prince of Darkness is about an apocalypse. It's about a virus that's been opened up that has caused mass madness.
Their posters are both very similar.
It's almost as if they're in the same, like, mythos, the same cycle.
Actually, apparently, from what I read online, apparently this is what he calls the Apocalypse trilogy.
Right.
The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and then...
And they have a lot of similar elements.
I have never heard of that before.
I would say that, I think that's a stretch, because I think, like, when you compare The Thing and In the Mouth of Madness, it's so opposite spectrums that the only thing is the paranoia aspect
and the apocalypse theme.
And the apocalyptic element to it. But I think other than that, like, comparing them is like apples and oranges. They're really not similar at all. But Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness is very similar. And then from there, too, we have not long after In the Mouth of Madness, though it was kind of forced upon him, Village of the Damned, which really it goes back to the elements of In the Mouth of Madness that come out, like children, creepy children that were used. This fits really well in that category. And I would say that this is probably John Carpenter's last best work. The one that is, part of his best works before he kind of
Stop giving a damn.
well, not just stopped giving a damn, but was kind of forced into it by certain production companies, things like that.
I know, but that's why he always was more of an independent filmmaker. Stayed away from. It was the thing that drove him away from Hollywood, just from how tedious. I'm pretty sure it was the thing that drove him away from bigger Hollywood productions.
Well, I mean, he still got into it here, but
I'll say that and Escape from LA. So
I just wanted to bring up that the similarities between this and Prince of Darkness is very apparent. Even to the point of like the atmospherics of it and the church settings and the just the whole moody setup is very similar to Prince of Darkness. So if you like In the Mouth of Madness, definitely check out Prince of Darkness. I would say Prince of Darkness is one of my favorite films. It definitely has one of my favorite scores. So check it out. But very similar. And I think, this one is very interesting, taking a lot from Stephen King and Lovecraft and making something unique out of it, I would say. Something that you don't really see that often.
What do you think Stephen King thought about the whole
Sutter Kane element?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? This is
I was just
definitely within Stephen King's wheelhouse and something he's written about in the past.
I was say, to be honest with you, I think the kind of homage King too, the one farm guy that ended up shooting himself in the bar, reminded me a lot of Stephen King Creepshow, because I feel like an older version. Like, oh, that's crap.
I think that Stephen King would definitely see a lot of similarities to some things that he wrote, like Typewriter of the Gods. Wherein the author has the ability to write whatever, and then it happens. There is certainly a lot of aspects like that. And also, I think that he would see what John Carpenter was saying, too, about Sutter Kane being sort of a godlike figure, is that you do, in some ways, as a writer, as a popular bestseller, have an opportunity to manipulate your readers in certain ways.
But I think that this is where I kind of have a problem with the film. The fact that they use a novelist, a horror novelist specifically, to get that message across. To me, I find it more. I know there are people who become obsessive and follow it kind of like as a cult, kind of like how people get really into the Harry Potter books and just go ape shit over them. But I mean, to me, I find it harder though for novels, especially horror novels. I know Stephen King has a huge following, but it's not like you hear someone was murdered today because they read it in a Stephen King novel.
I don't know. I do see the power of the written word, so I'm not going to discount that.
Well, you are a writer, so
yeah. But I also do see that I think this was what John Carpenter was saying as the first form. That you get everybody that you can who reads the book, but then you also make the movie. Because at the end of the film, they have the whole great line of what happens when people don't read. Well, you have the movie. I think that was a kind of a nod too to But
that's not Stephen King's fault, though.
No, I'm not saying it's his fault. But
it's not. Well, I guess. Well, who would that go to? Who would have to get the approval? Whoever owns the rights to the story. Which in his case, who is it? Is it him?
Well, yeah, he would probably sell the rights. But what I was actually getting at is that, I think that was just John Carpenter's nod of saying, what happens when books aren't really, and books are kind of becoming obsolete at that time in the 90s. What happens, when you don't have a book that can really influence people? Well, you have a movie. And I think that was really...
And he should know, he did a Stephen King movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was another meta inclusion in there of making movies and influencing people within the realism of it.
As I told you, I was watching, during the that time period, the topical thing would have been to do video games.
Yeah,
because how that goddamn Mortal Kombat, ripping people's hearts out. People are gonna been eating that shit up and they're gonna copy it.
Yeah,
but I could just see John Carpenter yeah, it's stupid. That it's just being a curmudgeon about it. I mean, I get it. It's an interesting idea, but again, especially today. I think if you're gonna go with a book, more the genre would have to be kind of I'd say maybe a murder mystery, or somebody who writes kind of more kind kind of like those stupid ass like Bill O'Reilly, like killing Kennedy, killing Reagan, type books, type of things where people could like, it's more grounded in like a reality itself compared to, because, I mean, granted, this film's based on the whole supernatural aspect too, so you kind of have to have like Lovecraftian elements to get you to the whole like all this crazy shit happening and is it real or not. But I think if you were to do like a real world scenario, it'd be more like kind of like murder mysteries, or where somebody
TV
would
or something. Yeah.
Well, not exactly TV, but like I said, if you were to do an author, like somebody who's an author, it'd be somebody who wrote like James Patterson novels, like oh, this murder mystery is going on. Somebody's do it like kind of
subtly influence them to murder,
like in Tenebrae.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's I mean, that's just kind of like a nitpick from me, though. I'm not saying it's a big problem, but I think
we didn't talk about the special effects yet, which was done by K&B, and most of the makeup effects and stuff were done by K&B. What did you think about the special effects in this film?
Not bad, but there's not that much. They're very limited. The only one that's bad is that one CGI they used at the end to show like Sutter Kane ripping himself like out of reality, and
I actually found that the K&B effects in this film were probably not their best. They definitely don't look as good as The Thing, which would have been released
10 years ago.
10 years prior to this. And part of that may be because we watched the Scream Factory Blu-ray. This is a 4K transfer. Obviously, it's been scaled down for 1080p for the Blu-ray. But I wonder if that does a sort of a disservice to the actual effects itself. It's clarifying the picture for sure, but it's also clarifying sort of the muddled intention behind the special effects that you don't really get to see all of the detail of it.
Well, but like. I can't really complain because, like, for the most part, like I said, there's not a lot going on. Like,
there isn't, but one thing that really stands out to me as sort of that doesn't look very good at all, at least now, is when Linda Stiles is doing her little exorcist shuffle with her head flipped back when she's
her spider walk.
Yeah, that looks fairly bad because it looks like a doll mask set on a face of a person. It looks that one for sure stood out to me as one of the worst elements of this film. But I think all of it really, if you're thinking, even like when Sutter Kane, when the camera spins around Sutter Kane and he's got the little, I don't know what it is, like demon that's crawling out of the backside of his head.
That looked cool.
I think it looks cool, but it's still, I think it also is a disservice that John Carpenter directed The Thing and none of this reaches The Thing levels of special effects.
Could that be budgetary though?
I'm sure completely possible.
I'm sure this film was not given anywhere.
Right.
Because again, The Thing was, I mean, I know this is it's a new line, so it's always going to be on the cheap. But I mean, compared to The Thing, he had a much better budget comparatively than, here. So, like I said, I didn't say anything was great because it's not, but it's definitely not anything, especially again, I hate to use the comparison, but compared to The Mangler, which came out around the same time too, effects in this are a billion times better than that,
That is true.
So there's no and I would say compared to a lot of horror films at the time, this has pretty decent, effects.
Yeah. How about the acting? We've already talked a little bit about Sam Neill.
And he's basically the whole fucking show.
He is. But I would say that Julie Carmen as Linda Stiles is a big part of this too.
She's just as wooden, if not more.
I definitely found her to be a downfall in this film.
Did you not find her seductive when we were first introduced to her?
With the sucking on the glasses.
Takes her glasses off and gives it
I think that was a goof at one point, though. Didn't it show her like putting the glasses away and then all of a sudden they were back out in her mouth?
Yeah.
I feel like that was a mix-up. But
just how you want your editor of your, for the publisher to be introduced, like, hi,
pantsuit and sucking on glasses.
Yeah, no wonder why Sam Neill tried to, force her into dinner. He was getting mixed signals there. He didn't know what to do.
I gotta say, though, that, Julie Carmen in this film, really not great. She has some really bad line deliveries, that's for sure. Especially towards, like, the middle of the film when she's starting to go crazy. I can't remember exactly what she says, but she's like, "I'm not myself. I'm not myself."
No, I'm not me.
I'm not me.
Yeah, she's like, "I'm not me."
Very terrible line delivery from that one. But,
I did love when she punches Sam Neill and he just fucking full on decks her right back. Like no shit's given.
There was like no hesitation or anything. He just takes the punch, punches her right back, and then he punches her again in the car. It's great. One other person that is a standout here is Charlton Heston. He plays the publisher himself, Jackson Harglow.
Doesn't get a Stephen King-esque name there too.
Doesn't get a lot of time on camera, but I think he does a fairly good job with what he's got.
Very reserved for him, Charlton Heston too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would have been one of his last films.
I was gonna say he died 14 years later, but I'm imagining.
Did he really?
Yeah, he died in 2008.
Oh.
But it has.
Yeah, it was really. I mean, he didn't really do that much else. He did a few other films in the 90s, but for the most part, yeah.
They were probably voiceovers, too.
Yeah, basically they were voiceovers. He really didn't do that much else. So it was really one of his final, film appearances where he got, some things to do in it.
I thought he was fine. Like I said, he was pretty reserved.
A nice addition is Frances Bay in this film as the hotel manager, Mrs. Pickman. Pickman being a reference to Pickman's model from Lovecraft.
Made me think of Fallout 4.
Yeah.
Pickman's Gallery, which I know is also a Lovecraft.
Also a Lovecraft reference.
Yep.
But she's very cute in this film, and I like to see her. And you brought up a nice joke from Happy Gilmore that she's in.
Maybe think of
talks about her. My fingers hurt.
No, that wasn't her. It's another old lady.
I know.
But that's my favorite. That's literally my favorite part in Happy Gilmore is when Ben Stiller's making the old ladies knit, and the one lady's like, "My fingers hurt." And he's like, "What's that now?" "My fingers hurt." "Well, your back's gonna hurt now because you just pulled yard duty." "Anyone else's fingers hurt?" I love it. That part, and when he's when Happy's like, "I heard you've been torturing these old ladies." And he's like, "No, your grandma's, she's senile, she's delusional. But we know this now. Now we can hear me and you. We'll do this together." And then he gets thrown out of the window.
Yeah,
it's great. And that handlebar mustache he's got in that.
It's true.
Oh, it's great.
Pretty much though, you're right. Sam Neill has mainly the priority here. I guess the only other person that I would reference is Jürgen Prochnow, who plays Sutter Kane, and I mean he's good, but really Sutter Kane's not the main focus of this film. Like having him actually on camera is not the focus that John Carpenter wanted to draw.
Till half the film.
Yeah, it was more so to have his godlike presence rather than actual imagery,
which I do. I do think he's good too. He plays a very good, madman.
He's got the curls.
It's interesting too. Like again, it's like is he being manipulated by these old gods and becoming one with them? Is this all just a bunch of bullshit? Is this all actually not even going on in Sam Neill's mind? Is this just a Sutter Kane story that's being incredibly meta?
It does bring up an interesting point too about Sutter Kane's own agency and
as a writer,
and like what you think of as a muse. And that the Elder Gods, perhaps Sutter Kane stumbled on something he shouldn't have, and now he's really a puppet to the Elder Gods and really has no control over what he's doing either. And that's probably about as Lovecraftian as it gets when you talk about themes, because ultimately that's what a lot of his stories boil down to, is someone stumbling on something they shouldn't, and then probably doing something bad in return when they really don't have control over it, or they think they don't have control
My
over
only
it.
problem with his whole character is, okay, so him and Sam Neill both agree with this concept that humanity's inherently a bad thing.
Right. It needs to be wiped out.
That kind of, to boil it down more like for me, like historical terms, kind of in like a Thomas Hobbesian type way that man is inherently evil and nasty and brutish. And that's why we have government to kind of control our nasty, evil ways and have society. Problem I have is, why do they think that, though? What has happened in both Sam Neill? I mean, Sam Neill's a little bit more clearer. As an insurance fraud claims guy, he's deals with low license scums
He deals with the worst. I mean, he deals with people who do arson
and trying to fraud the system. So that makes sense. But why does Sutter Kane think this? Why is that? Why is that his thinking? Or is it just enough that he thinks that, and because he's the writer, therefore, because he thinks that, he's imprinting that onto Sam Neill, who may or may not be a character in his novel.
True.
It's more if you like what we're doing right now, sit down, just kind of think about it. You can probably gather much more away from this film than John Carpenter, I guarantee, ever guaranteed. It's almost kind of a Romero type thing, where we're kind of like, well, George Romero just got lucky that a bunch of people overthought his film.
True.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that definitely John Carpenter had this in mind, but
I think you
can really spiral.
I know. Like I said, I do think the general ideas are there. I don't think he's really interested, though, in finding the answers to those ideas.
Yeah, right.
It's more, here's some ideas, and then let the audience kind of have things to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. I think he really wanted the audience to spiral, to continue thinking about it, and that at that point, like, you can really get into it even more and more.
Which would be its own type of madness.
Exactly, and that's the point. I think it's really interesting. I will say, like, wrapping this up, I don't think that In the Mouth of Madness is John Carpenter's best film. I don't think it is probably even close to the top, but it is a very good film regardless. And I think, like you were saying prior to that, even if you're second-tier John Carpenter film, that's still really good. I mean, we're not talking third-tier Ghost of Mars. We're talking second-tier John Carpenter film. I think In the Mouth of Madness is really good. It has a unique idea to it that really started the meta train. It's even before Scream with the meta aspect to it. Really getting that stuff started, and in this case, less about film.
To be fair, New Nightmare beat this.
Yeah.
Beat it to the meta. I'm getting to the meta.
True. Yeah, it did. I think it would have been just very, very early before this.
Well, no, you're right. I agree. I think this is a really good film. I'm just kind of, especially now that I'm more kind of thinking, opine about it, and this is actually kind of a film that's making me want to have another watch to kind of pick up on other clues. Like, are these intentional things that are put in there, or not? Kind of like how, like, after you watch The Thing, and if you're intrigued by it, like, I gotta watch it again so I can pick up on more and more of the clues. Like I said, my question is kind of now, like, why did this not do well? Is it like, because I don't remember as a child any marketing for this film. So did they not market it at all? Is the idea too out there? Which at the time wouldn't make sense, because the 90s, especially the early 90s, were a boon for, films kind of like that were kind of out there and different. Kind of like how the 70s was a great renaissance for a bunch of different films, because you could have any idea and filmmakers were like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. Just make money.
I mean, I remember the poster for it because my dad owned the video store at this time, and I do remember it. Whether it did well at the box office and stuff, I really don't know. I mean, I
just know it made its budget back.
Yeah. I mean, I think it did okay. I think as time went on, people recognized the value in it, and perhaps it
probably got forgotten.
Right.
And then,
I think maybe it took a little while for people to recognize the meta aspect to it and really appreciate it. But I think now it's pretty well respected. And people are really excited for Scream Factory to do this new release.
Well, it's been 25 years now, so
yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. I mean, it's a lot of time. But I'm just saying, like, because like I said, this film would not get made today,
right?
Even if you unless it was like a really well-known, like if maybe Christopher Nolan was like, I'm going to do this film. Like, all right, Chris, whatever you say, Yeah. But if you were just Joe, I mean, I'm not saying John Carpenter was Joe Schmo, but even still, like.
I think the closest that it's been is like Secret Window, which would be a Stephen King story, which is about a writer coming back and saying you plagiarized my work and stuff like that. And they're not sure whether they're in the story or not. But that was Johnny Depp in that movie. But
I remember.
Yeah, I think I think certainly this is a tough film to bring to light, especially because of the circular nature of it. People nowadays are really looking for a concrete answer to the end of the film. And even when I talked about it a little bit before, Hereditary, seeing that film has a I shouldn't say very, but it does have an open-ended conclusion. And that really irks some people because they did not like either that the film didn't come to a specific conclusion and it really let the viewer draw its own conclusions, or some people felt that it was even a little bit too conclusive. And so you do run into that aspect of like, do I give the audience the whole thing? Do I tell them what they should feel? Or do I let them just draw the conclusions from what they are? And I have to respect that John Carpenter really left it and said, here, here's the outline and you fill in the gaps. I appreciate that. And I think In the Mouth of Madness does it pretty well. And you can take from it what you want to and still have a pretty conclusive film. Whatever theme you want to look at. So it's interesting. All right, so let's give it a rating. Out of 10, let's just go with Sutter Kane novels. Because why not? Out of 10 Sutter Kane novels, with the iconic look of the 90s and late 80s horror novel book covers, what would you give In the Mouth of Madness?
Probably give it an 8. Despite like some of the quibbles I have with like kind of how they choose to kind of pick the story and how the acting is overall pretty bland, I think the concept and idea alone is very interesting and intriguing and very unique. I think kind of like I probably would have originally gave it like a 7.5, but like the more we kind of talked about it, I'm getting more and more about like just kind of thinking about the overarching themes and stuff, and it's a very thought-provoking film after kind of sitting down and talking about it for an hour and a half. So I mean, yeah, I mean, though it does have some very stereotypical early '90s run-of-the-mill acting soundtrack, like it's definitely not Carpenter's best soundtrack. Like I said, I think it's very interesting. I think it's got a very interesting premise that's just thought-provoking, like something that, well, I don't know, I guess, it's kind of right now hard, put into words just kind of how the whole idea.
It's mind-bending.
Yeah. It really is diving into the Mouth of Madness.
I guess I'd probably give this an 8.5. It's surprising that I'd never seen this before. I've heard a lot about it, and I guess I never really ventured out to see it. Like I said, I remember it at the video store, but
they never played on TV.
Never really got a playing on there. But
you would think this would be like a UPN special,
Yeah, I mean, it would have been really easy to get away with playing on TV too, because there's not a lot to like edit out or anything.
Just cuss words.
Yeah,
because it's not gory.
No,
I mean they do show splatters of blood, but anytime like
nudity.
No nudity. Anytime there's like when he like at the end when we put the axe in that one kid's head. You don't see it. They just cut away, and you get to see him like kind of smile. You know.
I mean, but I would say that this is probably, like I said, like it's second tier John Carpenter, but I think it's really good. I do appreciate some of the things about it, like the bringing to light the late 80s, early 90s book covers of horror novels, something that I have an affinity for. I think that the actings are right. I mean, Sam Neill's fine. I think sometimes he actually brings out the cheese a little bit, and I tend to enjoy that, especially when he's being sort of like a jokester towards the beginning of the film. He's kind of like especially like when he pulls out a fucking horn from his
dash, his glove
compartment. It's like, I want to know the purpose of just carrying that around in your glove compartment.
Well, as I told you, that's like the cleanest glove compartment ever. Because he had a bike horn and a bag of Ruffles chips.
And I mean, we all know that most people now are carrying a gun in there. So, but so I mean, I liked it. I think Sam Neill's okay in this film, but other than that, I think everything really comes together. I like the whole Lovecraftian nature of it, especially that they really play off of the Cthulhu mythos. And I think that leaving the open-ended approach to this film is something that John Carpenter did really well and allows the audience to really draw their own conclusions. And I think that's pretty much what In the Mouth of Madness does the best, is that it makes it so that there is sort of that paranoid idea of like what actually did happen within this film. You're not really sure. John Carpenter doesn't give you an answer, so you're forced to come up with it yourself. And that probably makes it even a little bit more
appealing
to you, yeah.
I would say we didn't even touch about one of my favorite moments is when after he's leaving Hobbs End and he's on the bus and he thinks he's gotten rid of the manuscript for the novel, and Sutter Kane shows up and he's like, "Do you know my favorite color is blue?" And like he wakes up and everything's got this blue tint to it.
Yeah,
that's all. That was
that's cool effect. Yeah,
that was really cool.
And that again brings up that idea that we talked about, where the film is really sort of colorful in certain ways.
Well, not only that, and then it also brings up, as you brought up, the whole like delusion side of delusion. So he sees that, and then he sees all this blue, and then like, oh, it's people are shaking, like, just dreaming, you're having a bad dream, and
All right, In the Mouth of Madness, check it out if you haven't seen it. It's on Scream Factory Blu-ray right now. They just released it, 4K scan, very good, looks great. I thought it looked great.
Yeah. I'm disappointed it took this long to see it.
Yeah, me too. All right, so what are we doing next week? Or next time? Next episode?
I don't know. What do you want to do?
I don't have any preferences. I picked this one. Did you have any ideas for it before we said In the Mouth of Madness? I thought you had mentioned something.
What, 1 hour photo?
Did you? Oh, I don't know.
I mean,
we can do 1 hour photo. I'm fine with that.
Oh, what was it? 6? I said that like one day I'd like to do that, and I've said that in the podcast.
Let's do it because we don't have anything else planned. Let's do 1 hour photo. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
Great Robin Williams film.
It is great. I remember it being great. I don't, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I remember it being a good film. So, all right, let's do it. Let's put it on the docket.
Awesome. Spoiler alert. It's one of my favorite films of all time.
Well, there you go. You're sure to get a good episode out of you then.
Hopefully. Hopefully I don't fuck it up.
All right. All right, so you can find us on Podbean, on iTunes, on Stitcher, any other podcasting app. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Blood and Black Rum Podcast. We're on Twitter at Blood and Black Rum. We are basically on pretty much everything else that you can think of for social media, so just find us on there. And we have an email address at bloodandblackrumpodcast@gmail.com. Write to us. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know any movies that you want us to cover. And then also, we do have a Patreon page at the Podbean account, bloodandblackrumpodcast.podbean.com, where you can donate to us, and that means that you get all of our episodes at least 1 day early, if we get them up in time. So $1 a month will get you that. So we appreciate anything you can donate. Thank you for listening. We will be back next time with 1 hour photo, Martin's favorite, one of his favorite films of all time, and most certainly his favorite Robin Williams film of all time.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. All right, just making sure. All right, take care.
See you later.